The fierce beginnings, Viking origins and expansion. The winds blew cold over the fjords of ancient Scandinavia. Rugged mountains loomed over valleys carved by glaciers, and forests stretched toward a distant, steel-gray sea. It was a land of extremes, of short, intense summers and long, merciless winters. Here, isolated communities clung to life, sustained by hard labor, tight kinship bonds, and a deep respect for the forces of nature that ruled their world. For generations, the people of this northern frontier were farmers, fishermen, and hunters. Their lives revolved around small villages and tribal alliances. But as populations grew and fertile land grew scarce, tensions rose. Internal competition for limited resources, paired with the rise of stronger chieftains and early kings, drove many to look beyond the horizon. No one knew exactly when the change occurred. It crept in slowly, at first in whispers of men building sleeker ships, of strangers testing the seas, of young warriors returning with silver and stories. But by the late 8th century, it could no longer be denied. Scandinavians had become Vikings, not just a people, but a force. What began as seasonal raids evolved into a storm of movement that reshaped the known world. In the year 793, the first thunderclap was heard across Europe. Monasteries in Lindisfarne were sacked, their scrolls burned, their treasures taken. To the Christian world, the attackers seemed like demons, savage and godless. But to the Norse, it was the start of something greater. A new age had begun. These early raiders were not mere savages. They were organized, intelligent, and strategic. They struck with precision, sailing up rivers and striking deep into the heart of kingdoms that thought themselves secure. They were not united under one banner, there was no Viking empire, but their ambitions were aligned. Glory, riches, honor, and survival propelled them forward. Names began to rise from the battle smoke in Saga songs. Ragnar Lothbrok, legendary for his cunning and bravery, captured the imagination of his people and the fear of his enemies. His sons would go on to carve their own paths, carrying fire and steel into the British Isles, France, and beyond. The Vikings had stepped onto the stage of history, not as spectators, but as authors. The unstoppable seafarers, Viking exploration and trade. Raiding had its rewards, but it was not the only path the Vikings walked. As the generations passed, curiosity and necessity led them to exploration. Their longships, masterpieces of naval engineering, allowed them to cross treacherous waters with speed and agility. The sea, once feared by many, became their road. First came Iceland, a stark land of volcanoes and glaciers. It became a sanctuary for outlaws, dreamers, and pioneers. Settlements rose from lava plains, and a new Norse society took root far from the mainland. Then came Greenland, discovered and settled by Eric the Red, a man as fierce as the world he found. There, Viking farmers braved brutal winters and attempted to create new homes on the edge of the earth. But the most daring voyage was still to come. Around the year 1000, Leif Erikson, son of Eric the Red, sailed west beyond the known world. After weeks at sea, he and his crew reached a land rich with timber and wild grapes. They called it Vinland, what we now know as part of North America. Though their stay was brief, their journey was historic. Long before Columbus, Norse explorers had crossed the Atlantic. Even as they pushed outward, Vikings built thriving trade networks. Their ships sailed not just to raid but to connect. From the frigid coasts of the Baltic Sea to the glittering markets of Baghdad, Viking merchants bartered amber, furs, honey, and slaves in exchange for silver, silk, and spices. Their influence spread deep into Eastern Europe through rivers like the Dnieper and Volga, linking Scandinavia with Byzantium and the Arab world. They were not just warriors, they were negotiators, diplomats, and cultural conduits. Wherever they traveled, they left traces of their presence and took with them new ideas, technologies, and beliefs. Life as a Viking, society, culture, and beliefs. Back home, Viking society was a world of order and tradition. Their communities were structured around a strict social hierarchy. At the top were kings and jarls, powerful leaders who ruled through strength, wealth, and loyalty. Below them were the carls, the free men who farmed, fought, and crafted the tools of daily life. At the bottom were the thralls, enslaved people who worked the land and served the households of their masters. Yet even within this rigid framework, there was mobility. A thrall could buy his freedom. A craftsman could rise in wealth and prestige. A warrior could win glory and land. Honor was currency, and deeds spoke louder than bloodlines. Viking women played significant roles in this world. While they were not equal in all respects, they held rights many European women did not. They could own property, manage estates, and initiate divorce. Some fought alongside men, Others wielded influence through wisdom, trade, and the power of the hearth. Religion was deeply woven into every aspect of life. The Norse gods, Odin, Thor, Freya, Loki, were not distant deities but living forces in the world. Sacrifices were made at sacred groves and stone altars. Myths were told by firelight, stories of the 9 realms, of Yggdrasil, the world tree, and of Ragnarok, the prophesied end of all things. Viking art reflected their beliefs and values. Intricate knotwork adorned weapons, jewelry, and buildings. Their ships, often adorned with dragon heads, were symbols of both beauty and terror. Music, poetry, and storytelling were treasured arts. Skalds, poets of great skill, carried the sagas of heroes from one generation to the next. Despite the common image of the Viking as a blood-soaked berserker, their lives were rich with culture, law, and craftsmanship. They loved tales of romance and betrayal, honored oaths, and lived by codes that balanced freedom with responsibility. The end of an era, the decline of Viking power. By the 11th century, the Viking world was changing. Europe was no longer the fractured land it had been. Kingdoms had grown stronger, and fortifications more resilient. The element of surprise that had once been the Vikings' greatest weapon began to fade. At the same time, Christianity began to take hold in Scandinavia. First resisted, then gradually adopted, it transformed the Viking worldview. Kings converted, sometimes out of genuine faith, sometimes for political gain. Pagan temples were destroyed or repurposed. The old gods receded into myth. The Christianization of the North brought new alliances, new laws, and a new identity. Raiding became less acceptable, and seafaring aggression gave way to colonization, trade, and integration. The Viking Age quietly drew to a close. Yet their impact endured. Norse words became part of the English language. Norse customs influenced local traditions across Britain, Ireland, Normandy, and Russia. Their descendants became kings, dukes, and merchants. Their spirit never truly disappeared. Archaeologists continue to uncover their secrets. From ship burials beneath mounds of earth to rune stones etched with names long forgotten, the story of the Vikings is still being written. Modern science has revealed their movements, their diets, and even their DNA. The world continues to be fascinated by who they were, and what they achieved. The Viking spirit, the enduring appeal of the Viking Age. Today, the Viking legacy lives on, not just in museums and historical texts, but in novels, films, and video games. From epic dramas to fantasy adventures, the world remains captivated by the tales of Norse warriors and gods. But this fascination runs deeper than entertainment. The Vikings symbolize something elemental: resilience in the face of hardship, the courage to explore the unknown, the strength to adapt, and the will to survive. Their story is one of constant transformation, from farmers to raiders, from raiders to explorers, from explorers to settlers. Through storms and battles, through loss and triumph, they carved a place in history that still shapes our modern world. In the end, the Vikings were not defined by their violence or their conquest. They were defined by their ingenuity, their adaptability, and their unyielding spirit. And that spirit endures, whispering still through the windswept fjords of the north.